It's still strange to talk about what happened. My name is Brooklyn Miller. And for years I believed that if you just did your job, did it well, that would be enough. Loyalty, expertise, I thought those were shields. But then came the day they called it streamlining for success. I called it the day they tried to gut the heart of everything we'd built. The very soul of a company that had, for decades, stood for something solid. And the thing is, I was the only one who really knew how all the pieces fit together to keep it from falling apart. If you've ever poured everything into a place, only to be shown the door, maybe my story will sound familiar. Because what they didn't know was that the quiet foundation they discarded was the one thing holding them up. Keystone Mutual Insurance. It wasn't just a name on a building for me. For 15 years it was, well, it felt like a calling, in its own way. Not like saving lives in an ER maybe, but protecting futures, livelihoods. My corner office, a bit worn around the edges, overlooking the bustling city square, was my command center. As senior sales manager, I was responsible for the lifeblood of the company. Our client relationships, the complex web of policies, the terabytes of data that held their trust, their histories. I knew our customer relationship management system, our CRM, like the back of my hand, every custom field I'd designed, every workaround for its quirks, every report that actually meant something. I understood the delicate balance between pushing for new business and nurturing the clients who'd been with us for generations. I knew the precise way to onboard a new agent, the subtle signs a major corporate account was wavering, the intricate logic of our commission structures. I was the quiet engine, the unseen architect of our sales division's consistent success. My team was lean, dedicated, and like me, we believed in doing right by our clients and by each other. We weren't the ones giving slick presentations in the boardroom or schmoozing at industry golf tournaments. We were the ones on the phones, in the trenches, in the sometimes chilly data processing annex, making sure every policy was accurate, every claim was handled with care, every client felt heard. Then came Devin Hayes, appointed as the new Chief Operations Officer. He blew in like a sudden storm front, all sharp Italian suits, blindingly white teeth, and a vocabulary dripping with buzzwords: synergy, disruption, agile frameworks, value optimization. He promised a new era of modernization, of disrupting the legacy mindset, as he put it. Chloe Bishop, our head of marketing, was instantly mesmerized, her eyes practically sparkling at the thought of bigger budgets for her glossy, nationwide campaigns. Campaigns that honestly never seemed to translate into actual, sustainable business. Evelyn Reed, Keystone's long-standing CEO, a formidable woman who'd built her career on integrity and old-school business acumen, seemed persuaded. Or maybe just tired. Tired of fighting for resources in a world that was increasingly valuing flash over actual substance, noise over results. I felt the ground shift almost immediately. A subtle, then not so subtle, recalibration of what mattered. My budget requests for essential CRM upgrades, for advanced training for my team on new compliance regulations, or even for just maintaining the robust, if slightly older, client data servers, they were met with deferrals, with polite but firm not right nows. Meanwhile, Chloe's ambitious, untested marketing initiatives got greenlit without a second glance. The steady, reassuring hum of our sales operations, the reliable click-clack of keyboards as my team serviced accounts, the very heartbeat of our client data system. It all suddenly felt a little more fragile, a little more exposed. I kept doing my job, of course. What else could I do? I patched the small cracks in our processes, updated our internal sales protocols with less support, documented everything with the same meticulous care I always had. I suppose I naively believed that the integrity of the work, the consistent numbers my team delivered year after year, would be its own best defense. I thought if I just kept everything running smoothly, quietly, surely they'd see its intrinsic value, protecting our clients' trust, our company's reputation. I've always believed that's beyond a simple price tag. It's a responsibility, and I clung to the idea that quiet, steadfast dedication would eventually speak louder than any buzzword. That truth, in the end, always carries its own weight. The first real tremor hit on a Tuesday. I remember the harsh, flickering fluorescent light in the IT support hub downstairs, A usually quiet space now buzzing with a nervous energy. One of the younger techs, eyes wide, mentioned an unusual lag in the primary client database. Devin had been pushing hard for a streamlined update to our core CRM platform. Something about a revolutionary user interface and AI-driven client insights. He'd brushed aside my detailed concerns about the stability of the proposed new system, about the lack of proper beta testing with our specific complex datasets. He was eager for a quick win, a tangible sign of his modernization efforts lighting up a PowerPoint slide. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe the funds that should have gone to shoring up our existing reliable, albeit legacy server infrastructure were quietly siphoned off to fund one of Chloe's extravagant brand awareness galas at some downtown hotel. Honestly, the exact cause, in the end, was less important than the effect. The system crashed. Hard. Not a flicker, not a slowdown that you could work around. It was a full-blown catastrophic failure. The digital equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane hitting our entire sales operation. Panic rippled through Keystone almost instantly. My sales agents, their faces pale, reported that entire client portfolios were inaccessible. Underwriters couldn't pull policy histories. New business quotes couldn't be generated. The commission tracking system, the one that ensured my team got paid accurately for their hard work, was a blank screen. Doctoral candidates on tight deadlines found their primary sources had vanished. The digital catalog, the meticulously curated gateway to centuries of knowledge, was a blank screen. It was bad. Devin, when he finally swaggered into the sales bullpen after a flurry of increasingly frantic calls from my team, was visibly flustered. His usual practiced, confident demeanor was replaced by a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. He barked a few useless generic orders about rebooting everything and checking the network connections. As if it were that simple. Chloe Bishop just wrung her hands, muttering about the impact on an upcoming quarterly earnings report and her precious marketing metrics. Ms. Reed, her face etched with a deep, weary concern, simply looked at me. Her eyes across the bustling, now chaotic floor held a silent plea. And the weight of it all, as it so often did, settled squarely onto my shoulders. I knew this system. I knew it intimately. I knew its redundancies, its hidden fail-safes I'd quietly built in over the years. The meticulous offline backups of critical configuration files I'd insisted on maintaining, despite Devin's constant grumbling about inefficient use of server space and Brooklyn's resistance to CL.UD native solutions. So I stayed. Long after everyone else had gone home, their faces a mixture of frustration, helplessness, and thinly veiled panic. I stayed. The main office floor, usually vibrant, was eerily quiet, cold. The only sounds were the frantic whir of server fans from the IT closet down the hall and the occasional ominous click from a struggling hard drive. I worked methodically like a surgeon in a dimly lit OR, tracing corrupted data pathways, rerouting network traffic, coaxing life back into the deadened system. It was like trying to perform CPR on a ghost. Hours bled into one another. The lukewarm coffee in my mug grew stone cold. My fingers ached from typing endless strings of recovery commands. My eyes burned from staring at lines of system logs, searching for the precise point of failure. But slowly, painstakingly, I began to pull it back from the brink. I restored the primary client database from a mirrored backup that only I knew was updated nightly, not weekly as the official IT protocol dictated. I bypassed the corrupted update module Devin's team had tried to force through. I rerouted access through a secondary, more stable data server I'd kept quietly maintained for just such an emergency. By the time the first pale, gray light of dawn crept through the grimy windows of the Keystone Mutual building, tinting the empty cubicles with a ghostly glow, the system was stable. It was breathing again. Exhausted, every nerve ending frayed, but with a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment, I logged the final recovery steps. I sent a brief, factual email to Devin and MS. Reed, outlining the actions taken and confirming system restoration. A small, foolish part of me, it dared to hope. Maybe this time. After pulling them back from the absolute edge of a cliff, they would finally see. See the value, see the expertise, see the dedication that didn't come with a fancy title or a slick sales pitch. Instead of a thank you or even a simple acknowledgement of the all-nighter I just pulled to save their bacon, I received an email the next afternoon. The subject line was chillingly sterile. Meeting request to Hayes. My stomach tightened into a cold knot. I knew that tone. That impersonal, corporate-speak tone that usually preceded something unpleasant. I walked into Devon's office, all gleaming glass and polished chrome, a stark, cold contrast to the warm, worn oak and comfortable familiarity of the rest of Keystone, or at least, how it used to be. He was there, perched on the edge of his ridiculously oversized desk. And with him was a woman from human resources I'd never seen before. Someone with a professionally sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Brenda, I think her name was. Devon didn't meet my gaze. He gestured vaguely toward one of the uncomfortable designer chairs. Brooklyn, he began, his voice utterly devoid of any warmth, any recognition of the previous night's Herculean effort. As you know, Keystone Mutual is undergoing a significant restructuring to optimize our operations and align with our new strategic vision for enhanced market penetration. My blood ran cold. I could feel the color draining from my face. I knew with a sickening certainty what was coming. As part of this process, he continued, shuffling a stack of papers on his desk, still avoiding eye contact, we've had to make some difficult decisions. Your current role as senior sales manager is being eliminated. Eliminated. Just like that. After 15 years. After single-handedly wrestling our entire client database, our company's operational heart, back from the abyss less than 24 hours ago. Eliminated. The word hung in the air. Heavy and suffocating. He actually went on droning something about redundancy in current skill sets, and a need for more dynamic, digitally native leadership in the sales vertical. He even had the unmitigated audacity to imply, subtly but unmistakably, that the recent system failure, the one I had fixed, was somehow indicative of the outdated nature of my department's approach, of my resistance to innovation. No mention of my all-nighter. No acknowledgement of the catastrophe I'd averted. Not a single word of thanks. Just a cold, clinical, pre-rehearsed dismissal. I just sat there, stunned into silence. The air in that glass box of an office felt thick, like I couldn't draw a proper breath. I remembered all the years, all the late nights, all the weekends I'd poured into this company. Not for praise, not for awards, but for the work itself. For the belief in what we were doing, in protecting our clients, in building something solid and trustworthy. Betrayal. It's a quiet, cold thing. It doesn't scream. It just seeps into your bones, chilling you from the inside out. Later that day, as I was numbly packing a small cardboard box with the remnants of my 15 years, a few industry awards, a framed photo of my first sales team, a chipped coffee mug a client had given me, I saw a printout lying face down in the tray of the shared department printer. Curiosity, or maybe some bruised, battered premonition, made me pick it up. It was an internal memo, a list of positions slated for phased redundancy, under Devon Hayes's optimization plan phase 1. My name was there. Brooklyn Miller, Senior Sales Manager. And the date on the memo? 2 weeks before the system crash. They had been planning to cut me all along. The crisis, my desperate, exhausting efforts to save them. To save the company, it hadn't mattered. Not one bit. I was already a ghost in their machine. A line item on a spreadsheet. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the last bit of air out of me. I saw Liam Carter, the bright young sales analyst I'd been mentoring, in the hallway outside my now former office. He looked at me, his eyes full of a pained, helpless sort of apology. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then just looked away, his shoulders slumped. Ms. Reed, when I passed her glass-walled office on my way to the elevator, offered a brief, deeply uncomfortable nod, her gaze quickly returning to the mountain of papers on her desk. The silence from those who knew, those who should have spoken up, those whose careers I had helped build in some ways, that cut deeper than Devon's corporate jargon or Brenda's practiced sympathy. Leaving Keystone Mutual for the last time felt surreal. The heavy, automated glass doors of the lobby slid closed behind me with a soft whoosh that seemed to echo the finality of it all. I carried that small box, holding not just my meager personal belongings, But 15 years of dedication, of expertise, of loyalty, all now deemed redundant. There was a strange sort of calm mixed with the deep, throbbing ache in my chest. I didn't try to fight it. Didn't make a scene in Devon's office. What would have been the point? They had made their decision weeks ago. They just hadn't bothered to tell me. I did, however, keep one thing. A small, unassuming USB drive. On it, I had meticulously, over the years, backed up all my procedural notes, my custom CRM configuration guides, the specialized sales process flows I'd written to manage the unique quirks of Keystone's diverse client base, and the critical access protocols for our more complex data systems. Not for sabotage. That wasn't my way, not then, not ever. It was a just in case. A backup for my own conscience, a record of the silent, often invisible work I'd done. I'd labeled the main folder on it, with a touch of unconscious irony, Legacy and Keystone. It was just a few weeks later, maybe 3, when the first whispers reached me. A former colleague from my old team, hesitant, almost apologetic, mentioned in a carefully worded email that things were a bit chaotic in the sales department. The new streamlined processes Devon Hayes had implemented with such fanfare weren't quite streamlining anything. In fact, they were causing more problems than they solved. Small errors were creeping into client policies. Retrieval times for crucial account data were slowing to a crawl. The meticulous cross-referencing system I'd built, the one that allowed agents to quickly trace connections between different policies held by a single corporate client, or to understand a family's entire insurance portfolio at a glance, that was apparently becoming tangled, unreliable. Liam Carter, bless his heart, was one of the first to really see it. He was young, sharp, and he'd watched me work closely for the past 2 years. He knew the level of detail, the almost intuitive understanding I'd had of that vast, sprawling collection of client data and sales processes. He started finding my old BM_method documents, the little patches and workarounds I'd put in place to keep things running smoothly, the custom report templates that actually gave actionable insights, things no one else even knew existed or understood the purpose of. He told me later, much later, that it was like finding hidden keystones in an ancient archway. You remove one, even a small one you didn't think mattered, and the whole damn thing starts to wobble. Chloe Bishop, the marketing queen I heard through the grapevine, was becoming increasingly frustrated. The sales data she needed for her glossy campaign performance reports, the numbers she relied on to justify her ever-expanding budget to Devon, were suddenly unreliable. Conversion rates didn't match. Lead tracking was a mess. Projections were wildly off. She, of course, blamed the archaic legacy systems and the uncooperative sales team, never once considering that the archaic system had been held together by a human element, by deep institutional knowledge, that was no longer there. Our clients, the lifeblood of Keystone Mutual, began to grumble more loudly. Access to their own policy information online was clunky. Simple change requests were taking weeks instead of days. Files were being mislabeled or, worse, temporarily lost in the digital shuffle. The digital silence that had once been the hum of an efficient, well-oiled sales operation was now punctuated by system glitches, dropped calls, and frustrating dead ends. The absence of one quiet, meticulous sales manager was beginning to create a very, very audible echo. The real storm, though, the one that finally shook the foundations of Keystone Mutual, broke about 2 months after I left. It wasn't a sudden dramatic crash like before. This was worse. This was a slow, insidious unraveling. A critical server array, the one responsible for housing the master copies of all active client policies and their payment histories, literally millions of records, decades of irreplaceable financial data, began to fail. Not all at once, but drive by drive, like a creeping sickness. The automated backup system, which Devon's new cost-efficient tech consultant had reconfigured to optimize storage resources, cut corners, hadn't been functioning correctly for weeks. No one had noticed. Or rather, no one with the deep systemic knowledge to understand the subtle warning signs in the daily error logs. No one who knew what normal looked like was there to notice. The little red flags I used to catch in my weekly reviews of system performance reports were now just unread data points. The potential loss was unthinkable. These weren't just files. They were legally binding contracts, financial histories, the bedrock of our clients' security, and our company's solvency. Word of the escalating data crisis spread through Keystone like wildfire. This time, the panic wasn't just a ripple. It was a palpable, suffocating wave. Devin Hayes, I was told by a still sympathetic contact in HR, was a wreck. His carefully constructed bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by a desperate, hollow-eyed fear. He alternately blustered and blamed, first the hardware, then the software, then ridiculously, the inherent instability of aged data. Anything and anyone but his own reckless decisions and the dismantling of competent oversight. Chloe Bishop was reportedly frantic, envisioning headlines about lost client data, regulatory fines, and the catastrophic withdrawal of major corporate accounts and investor confidence. And Ms. Evelyn Reed. Ms. Reed finally, truly, understood the full extent of their catastrophic mistake. She had allowed a pursuit of superficial, buzzword-laden efficiency to dismantle the very core of Keystone Mutual's operational integrity, the quiet expertise that had kept it safe and profitable for so long. It was Liam Carter, young Liam, who, after days of frantically poring over my old documentation, the very documentation Devin had dismissed as unnecessarily complex and not aligned with agile best practices, realized the true scale of the impending disaster. He also realized that some of the deepest recovery protocols, the ultimate fail-safes for that particular critical server array, the ones designed to restore data integrity from catastrophic corruption, they were tied to specific encryption keys and master access permissions that I, and only I, had fully configured and meticulously documented in a way only I truly understood. He found my legacy notes, the ones I'd left in a secure digital folder he knew about, just in case. He saw the complexity, the foresight, the layers of protection I had built over years, and he knew. He knew they were in way over their heads. That afternoon my phone rang. It was a number I recognized but hadn't expected to see again. Miss Evelyn Reed. Her voice when I answered was strained, stripped of its usual commanding academic authority. It was thin, almost frail. "Brooklyn," she began. No preamble, no pleasantries. "Brooklyn, we have a situation. A critical one," she explained, her words tumbling out. The full horror of what was happening to the client policy database, the potential for irretrievable data loss. Then came the plea. "We need you, Brooklyn. Keystone Mutual needs you. We'll pay whatever you ask. A consultancy fee, of course. A significant one. Name your price. Just please. You're the only one who," her voice trailed off, thick with a desperation that was a universe away from the cold, clinical dismissal I'd received in Devin's chrome and glass office just a few short months prior. Emails followed. Frantic, increasingly generous offers from Devin Hayes, from Brenda in HR, from other executives I barely knew. Each one more urgent, more laden with promises than the last. They needed the quiet woman they'd so carelessly cast aside. They needed her expertise, her knowledge, her meticulousness. They needed it now. Urgently. I let their calls go to voicemail. I read their emails, each one a small, potent testament to their dawning, panicked realization. There was a certain grim satisfaction in it, I admit. Not a desire for revenge, not really. That's not who I am. But it was a quiet, internal affirmation of what I'd always known, always believed. That true value isn't always loud. Isn't always dressed in a sharp suit or presented in a slick PowerPoint deck filled with meaningless jargon. Sometimes, often, it's in the meticulous, unseen, thankless work that keeps the very foundations from crumbling. I took a few days. I thought about it. I really did. I thought about the clients, their policies, the trust they'd placed in Keystone. That was the part that tugged at me, the part that made me hesitate. That was my work, my legacy, even if they'd tried to erase it. But I also thought about the dismissal, the cold, calculated disrespect, the casual, almost gleeful erasure of 15 years of my dedication, my life's work. Finally, I replied to Ms. Reed's email. It was short, polite, to the point. "Ms. Reed," I wrote, "thank you for reaching out. I understand the gravity of the situation you're facing at Keystone Mutual. However, as you know, I have moved on to new endeavors and am no longer in a position to provide the specialized support the company requires at this time. I sincerely wish you and the entire Keystone team the very best in resolving these significant challenges. And then I added one final sentence, a quiet little twist of the knife perhaps, but a necessary one. As a matter of urgency, I would also strongly recommend that you ensure any and all system access credentials previously associated with my employment be thoroughly reviewed and permanently disabled, if they haven't been already.
No demands. No recriminations.
Just a gentle, unequivocal, and very final no. I closed my laptop. The silence that followed from Keystone Mutual after that email was profound. It lasted for about a week. Then the dam truly broke. Key corporate clients, learning through the industry grapevine about the escalating data crisis and the gross mismanagement, began to publicly withdraw their multi-million-dollar group policies. Several prominent, long-tenured sales agents, their commission payments in chaos and their trust in leadership shattered, resigned in protest, taking their valuable books of business with them. The carefully constructed facade of Keystone Mutual's decades-old prestige, its reputation for stability and reliability, began to visibly crumble, like old mortar in a failing wall. And then, as one door creaked shut on its rusty hinges, another, much brighter one, swung wide open for me. Mr. Arthur Sterling, the highly respected president and CEO of Sterling Advisory Group, a prestigious boutique insurance and financial services firm known for its serious, impactful work, its ethical practices, and its unwavering commitment to high-touch client stewardship, contacted me directly. He'd heard about the unfolding situation at Keystone Mutual through various high-level industry channels. He also knew, through a former senior colleague of mine who now worked with him at Sterling, about my specific expertise, my quiet dedication, and the circumstances of my departure. Ms. Miller. His email began direct and courteous. I've been following recent developments at Keystone with some concern. It strikes me that your particular skill set and your commitment to data integrity and client service are uniquely valuable and perhaps have been underappreciated in certain quarters. He invited me for a meeting. Mr. Sterling was nothing like Devin Hayes. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with eyes that were sharp, discerning, and kind. His questions were precise, insightful. He didn't talk about synergy or disrupting paradigms. He talked about stewardship, about trust, about building lasting value for clients and for the firm. He didn't offer buzzwords. He offered genuine respect. He listened more than he spoke. He offered me the role of Vice President of Sales Operations and Client Systems for the Sterling Advisory Group. Full autonomy to build and refine their client management infrastructure, to develop a new state-of-the-art sales training initiative, a generous salary, comprehensive benefits, and most importantly, an environment where deep expertise and quiet competence were not just valued, but actively sought out and rewarded, not optimized away. I accepted. Starting at Sterling Advisory Group was like stepping into clean, clear, fresh air after being trapped for too long in a dusty, neglected, and increasingly toxic room. The work was challenging. Ambitious, yes. But it was supported by a genuine, top-down commitment to excellence, to doing things the right way, the ethical way, for the long term. Mr. Sterling trusted my judgment, valued my input, gave me the resources and the runway I needed. My new team was small, but brilliant, experienced, and eager to build something truly lasting, something we could all be proud of. We began a comprehensive overhaul of Sterling's client data management protocols, developing new, more robust systems for long-term data security and accessibility. We forged partnerships with leading financial technology firms to integrate cutting-edge, ethical tools that actually enhance client service, rather than just looking good on a marketing slide. We started building a sales training program focused on deep product knowledge, ethical conduct, and genuine client relationship building, the kind of foundational work Keystone had systematically dismantled. Our work wasn't always flashy, but it was solid, meaningful, and it was already yielding tangible results in client satisfaction and retention. Meanwhile, the news from Keystone Mutual, when it trickled in, continued to be bleak. Devin Hayes was eventually, and very quietly, forced to resign, his vision having led the company to the brink of collapse. Ms. Evelyn Reed, her formidable reputation sadly tarnished by the whole affair, took an early, and reportedly reluctant, retirement. Keystone Mutual, I heard, was struggling desperately to find anyone competent enough and willing enough to even attempt to pick up the shattered pieces of its client database and its decimated sales force. The cost of their short-sightedness was proving to be astronomical, both financially and reputationally. The story, in its own quiet way, began to circulate. Not in a scandalous, gossipy fashion. The insurance world is too small and too regulated for that. But more as a sobering cautionary tale within the tight-knit circles of financial services professionals, risk managers, and IT specialists. Industry blogs and specialized trade journals publish thoughtful, if carefully anonymized, analyses on the Keystone crisis, discussing the profound perils of prioritizing superficial modernization and cost-cutting over deep institutional knowledge, the critical importance of valuing the often invisible work of data stewards and process architects. Liam Carter, who had also wisely left Keystone shortly after I did, never spoke ill of them publicly, but I know he shared his experiences, his first-hand observations of the chaos, with a few trusted mentors and colleagues in the industry. He highlighted the meticulous systems I'd built, the foresight I'd shown in my documentation and contingency planning, the quiet, unwavering dedication that had been so carelessly, so arrogantly dismissed. He didn't have to name names. The truth, as it often does, had a way of seeping out, like water finding its own level. My name, Brooklyn Miller, began to be associated not with failure, or with being redundant, but with a quiet, steadfast competence. A competence that had been proven, tragically for Keystone Mutual, most profoundly by its absence. Client trust, it seemed, was indeed speaking for itself. About a year later, I was invited to give a keynote address at the National Insurance Leadership Summit. Standing on that stage, looking out at a sea of faces, executives, underwriters, claims specialists, sales leaders, technologists, people who understood the profound responsibility of our shared work, the delicate balance of risk and trust, I felt a quiet, unexpected sense of arrival. I didn't mention Keystone Mutual by name. I didn't need to. The story, in its essential elements, was already known to many in that room. I spoke instead about the soul of our industry, not just policies and premiums, but the human lives and futures we were entrusted to protect. I talked about the ethical imperative to safeguard not just financial data, but the client trust embedded within it. I talked about the quiet guardians, the often unseen individuals, the systems architects and the process managers, whose meticulous, diligent work forms the very bedrock of our industry's integrity and our clients' peace of mind. True stewardship in this business, I said, my voice calm and clear, resonating in the large hall, isn't about quarterly earnings reports alone, or impressive-sounding, disruptive initiatives that grab headlines but lack substance. It's about a deep, unwavering, daily commitment to the integrity of the promises we make, to the truth and accuracy of the records we keep. It's about valuing the hands that carefully craft clear, fair policies and the minds that build resilient, secure digital fortresses to protect our clients' most sensitive information and their financial well-being. I paused, letting the words settle. Sometimes the most vital work, the work that truly underpins everything else, is the least visible. And sometimes the loudest silence, the most damning indictment, is the one left behind when that essential quiet work is no longer done, or no longer valued. I spoke not of revenge but of resilience, of the quiet, unshakable power that comes from staying true to your professional principles, to your ethical core, even when the world around you, or the leadership above you, seems to value only noise, expediency, and the illusion of progress. I shared how in my own journey, I discovered that my voice didn't need to be the loudest to be heard. It just needed to be authentic. And it needed the right audience, an audience that understood the language of dedication, of deep expertise, of quiet, unwavering commitment to doing the right thing. After the address, many people came up to me, not to congratulate me on some perceived victory over a former employer, but to share their own stories. Stories of quiet struggles within their own organizations, of feeling undervalued despite their critical contributions, of fighting to protect something precious: data integrity, client trust, ethical standards, in a corporate world that often seemed indifferent, or even hostile, to those very things. It was in those shared moments, those quiet, knowing acknowledgments from my peers, that I felt the deepest, most meaningful sense of vindication. Not a triumph over anyone, but a triumph of something far more important, of principle, of dedication, of the enduring, often underestimated power of quiet, steadfast, excellent work. I realized then, standing there, that the real strength isn't in desperately trying to prove yourself to those who refuse to see your worth. It's in living your truth, in doing the work that truly matters with integrity and passion, and letting that quiet excellence, that unwavering commitment, speak for itself. It always will. Eventually. My time at Keystone Mutual was a painful chapter, yes. A bruising, disillusioning experience. But it was also the crucible that forged a deeper understanding of my own worth, of my resilience, and of the true, profound meaning of stewardship in my profession. The silence I left behind at Keystone, the operational chaos that bloomed in my absence, it eventually became the loudest, most undeniable testament to the value they had so carelessly, so arrogantly discarded. And for me, looking back now from a place of peace and genuine professional fulfillment, that was more than enough. That whole journey taught me something profound. You don't always need to shout to be heard. Truth, much like the deep foundational trust we strive to build in our work and in our lives, has its own weight, its own undeniable voice. And true dignity, I've learned, lies in upholding your values, in doing your best work with integrity, even when no one is applauding, even when you're being actively undermined. Because in the end, the recognition that truly matters, the respect that truly sustains you, comes from those who genuinely see you, from those who understand the depth and the substance of your contributions, not from those who only ever look at the surface, or who are only impressed by the loudest noise. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever felt your efforts go unrecognized or been sidelined despite your deepest contributions, I'd genuinely love to hear your story. Please feel free to share it in the comments below. I believe every one of us has experiences worth listening to, experiences that can offer strength and perspective to others. And I promise, I always read every single one. If this story resonated with you, and you'd like to continue journeying with us as we explore more stories of finding value, of overcoming injustice, and of building inner strength, please don't forget to subscribe to TK Revenge Story. We have many more meaningful journeys to share with you. And if you feel moved to offer support to the channel, the super thanks button is always there, and always deeply appreciated, because sometimes giving, no matter how small the gesture, is also a part of our own healing, our own way of acknowledging shared strength, and our own process of moving forward. Someone out there right now might need to hear this. Quiet isn't weakness. It's an unspoken power. Trust yours.